Hello, Giulia. Many thanks for joining us for this conversation on responsible innovation in small and medium-sized enterprises, and also specifically in the area of information and communication technologies, where you are an expert. You are joining us from the Center for Innovation and Economic Development at the Chamber of Commerce of Romagna in Italy. Could you just start off the conversation, give us a little bit of an introduction to your background and what keeps you busy every day?
Okay, hello, and thank you for having me and for your interest in our activity. The Center for Innovation and Economic Development was funded in 1996 by the then Chamber of Commerce of Cesena to add capacity in pursuing economic development through innovation as a driver. And over the years, we interpreted innovation not just as technological innovation, but also organizational innovation. And that is why we developed let's call it a line of business in corporate social responsibility, which then took us again back to innovation and to the domain of responsible research and innovation. So at the end of the day, we found a way to keep together our two souls, the corporate social accountability and the innovation, technological innovation part of our activity. We mainly work with SMEs for the mere fact that they're the vast majority of enterprises that are located here.
Great. Let's pick up right on that. You've mentioned 3 pillars of your work: the innovation support, the corporate accountability and sustainability aspect, and responsible innovation as that new and now central concept that has entered your work. How does responsible innovation connect to corporate responsibility, and why do you feel it's such a promising concept also for supporting innovative SMEs?
I think there's a triple bottom line in CSR, which works as well for responsible research and innovation. So we're talking about environment, people, and profit, as in competitive development, as in the fact that I think that enterprises have a social responsibility in producing, in being competitive and producing growth, enabling growth, and creating more and better jobs. So I like to keep the 3 elements, you know, the competitiveness and also the sustainability and social accountability together. I think that what is more powerful in responsible innovation is that it forces enterprises to do that kind of thinking at the very, very beginning of their innovation process, and therefore before the product has been figured out and before the process is designed.
And what are the most important elements of responsible innovation that you find are attractive to the companies you're working with?
Engaging with the leaders within the company, that's often the owner or the owners, that's very important. So it's important to start from a philosophical kind of choice and to start a dialogue on whether they want to do good, you know. Well, in the EU keys, it's open science, but we normally translate that into open innovation. And that's also very important for SMEs, not just because now it's trendy, so it does ring a bell also to them, but because it allows to source for ideas from a wider number of actors that that they have within their companies, and also because it enables reaching a critical mass to produce innovation that often require way more competencies and resources than those that are available, within a single SME. Also, the element of governance, in the definition of the keys, governance is more like the concept of partnership within UN Agenda 2030. But I think that if we look at governance as the need to put in place a process to generate innovation that includes participation of all the different players that you have within a same company, if you look at that as the requirement for a strategic approach to innovation, a structured approach to innovation, that also the element of governance really matters to SMEs. And then there's the element of gender. I think it's important, not because they realize it is, but because they think they're okay already. But then when you start a conversation of them on that, they do realize that we're looking at things in a very, very shallow way.
How do you engage with SMEs when they come across this concept for the first time? How do you start this dialogue with SMEs on issues like gender, ethics, participation, and the reflection on that and what it might mean for them?
You have to realize that small and medium enterprises lacking resources, human resources, financial resources. So if you're too theoretical, if you're a purist about it, you might scare them away. So yeah, I think what is important is to really start the dialogue with every single SMEs and understand what's in place, what matters to them, and then work from that all the way to the concept of responsible innovation as it should be. The risk is that you kind of oversimplify the concept of responsible innovation.
What do you feel is the importance of a business case for making responsible innovation attractive to companies? I mean, for CSR, we've had this conversation for 20 years. Does it pay off? We need to have a business case. If there's a business case, companies will sign on. For responsible innovation, we're starting to have the same type of conversation. So do we need a business case for responsible innovation? And if yes, what is it?
Well, that is what enterprises ask every time you start a conversation on responsible innovation. Does it work? So it's important that those enterprises, companies, or corporations that actually achieve some tangible results for being responsible innovators, disseminate their case.
Let's talk about a couple of non-tangible aspects that have been suggested as, being part of a maybe long-term business case for responsible innovation. And I would just like to give a couple of statements to you and see whether they resonate with your experience in working with SMEs on this topic. One of them is responsible innovation helps generate more and better and more creative ideas at the beginning of innovation processes. Something you
Definitely.
would agree on?
Absolutely. And I think this is what really wins SMEs over to responsible innovation. When they realize that opening their innovation process, not necessarily to external players, but also just to the diversity of internal players, brings more and totally different and unexpected ideas to the table, then they really start liking this responsible innovation. It's like a boosted version of design thinking.
Another statement that I've heard a lot in this context was responsible innovation helps you better know the needs of your customers, and it builds consumer trust in your company.
So the fact that it helps to better know your clients, consumers' needs, I totally agree with that, because in the first place, it demands that you ask them, that you engage with them in a mutually responsive process of defining what matters, what should be taken care of. So it helps understanding better your market, and because it demands that the same openness happens also within the company. It also allows companies to understand better what the needs related to the process of designing, producing, and distributing their goods are. And so it also improves an understanding of the needs along the whole value chain. It definitely creates better trust among the people that are involved in the innovation process. So also the consumers or clients that are directly engaged. In terms of building trust among the wider audience of global consumers, it depends on how the company is able to convey their commitment. It's easier for large corporations, maybe. It's not as easy for SMEs.
The third statement that I've heard in relation to a business case for responsible innovation is that being a responsible innovator helps you attract financing and capital for your company, or it may help you attract new buyers or investors into your new innovation, new product, new approach to something.
There are definitely some investors that look at impact, and that is growing. Companies that have more structured long-term approach to innovation are more resilient to crisis. That will also work towards investors being more sensitive to responsible innovation being placed where they put their money.
What do you feel are the tools, the mechanisms that could really support companies in breaking responsible innovation down and implementing it in day-to-day practice?
Design thinking is very interesting set of methodologies to help SME turn responsible innovation concept into their business model, into the way they do things. And the self-assessment tools, starting from RRI Compass, are also important because they trigger an actual thinking on the systemic approach, the structural approach that should be in place. And I've seen also some interesting example of roadmaps for companies. So methodologies and templates to keep track and plan out innovation processes, so that you make sure that, you know, along the way you keep complying with the principle of responsible innovation. So I think that roadmaps are also very interesting, because it keeps bringing the results. It allows monitoring of the process, so it is steered and kept on track. Something else that is really needed, I think, is a business model for living labs. I mean, it's really, really difficult for small and medium enterprises to be able to maintain this, you know, long-term relationship with consumers that is demanded, you know, if you want to be compliant with the idea of responsible innovation as it is laid out in the definition.
What would be a key piece of advice that you would give to a company engaging with responsible innovation for a first time?
The key element of responsible innovation is really to be able to understand what matters, looking at the future, understanding what kind of future we all want to be part of, and do our part as entrepreneurs, as you know, as professionals, as consumers. You got to believe in it. Unless there's a conviction on the company's part, and I'm talking about SMEs, where the owner is the leader, and where there's, you know, personal relations in place. It's either they believe in being responsible innovators, or there's no business case or success stories that will ever convince them. You know, looking at SMEs, the way I know them, at least locally, you know, the leaders must be convinced. It's a change in their mindset that we need to pursue to start.
It has been a pleasure talking to you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much for the interview.